I'm going to talk about, yes, the how to do a safe system assessment. And then at the end, as I mentioned, you'll be sent out there to do one, a sort of mock one. We've refined a few things on it, but essentially you'll be going through that process for safe system assessment. So, okay, just to recap, we've talked about the safe system philosophy. We had some really good discussions there. We made sure everybody was on the same page with the safe system. I think we're good there. Some of you have been hearing about the safe system for many years, so you're quite comfortable with it. So that's all been good discussion. We got into that exposure, likelihood, and severity way of thinking about risk, which is going to become really important as we fill out the safe system assessment matrix, which I'll introduce you to shortly. But these are the elements that we need to be thinking about. And in that severity one, we talked a lot about kinetic energy thresholds and what the human body can handle in different crash types. We saw these graphs. We talked about that kick up around the 30 kilometers an hour for pedestrians, 50 kilometers an hour for side impact, that head-on crash, 70 kilometer per hour, and the dangers after that. We briefly looked at this colorful graph where we're getting a general indication of sort of severity magnitudes of different crash types. And within this, you see that we've got those numbers there, don't we? We've got numbers here that are relating to specific crash speeds, not speed limits, but crash impact speeds. Speed limit could influence that, but and we'll be using these numbers shortly in our actual quantitative assessment of potential crashes. So we're going to now just go through the mechanics of writing up this safe system assessment and what we put where. But I think get a little idea of where people are at, and just to make sure you're still with me. Let's pop up a poll there, please, Marissa. And it's just to get an indication and an idea from our group here. What has been your involvement with safe system assessments? Nothing. Safe system, what now? Heard the term, but not much more. Had one done on one of my projects. Done one yourself, or been involved in a team that's doing one, or you live, breathe, and eat safe system assessments. So we'll give everybody a second on that, and that'll give us a good indication of where the group's at. Give it another couple of seconds. Okay, let's end that. Display the results. So most people heard the term, but don't know much more, but we've had a few people had them done on their projects, and actually quite a few people have been involved and been doing safe system assessments in one form or another. So that's exciting. Good to see. Let's get rid of that. That helps me just sort of calibrate things, but I will go from the sort of basics. But Ostroad sets out the safe system assessment process in the safe system assessment framework document here. It was released in 2016. So I was on the Ostroads working group for this one. So I wasn't one of the authors, but we had some workshops and discussed lots of aspects of it. And back then, sort of before 2016, myself and a colleague were doing things we called safe system audits, which were looking at projects and sort of commenting on their alignment with safe system principles. There was a guy in Western Australia doing it, and somebody in New Zealand doing something similar. So they took those ideas and then workshopped with a whole lot of people different ways to do it and came up with this process. But at the time, like, that process hadn't been used a lot, hadn't been done a lot. So there was some things in there that in reality don't play out that well. And so some jurisdictions had put supplementary guidance out, clarified things, made some adjustments and the like. So we're still hoping for a version 2 of the Austrade Safe System Assessment Framework to come out. That'd be exciting. But at the moment, we've got this 2016 one, and we've got some jurisdictional supplements, which I'll talk you through. But this sets out the process I'm going to take you through. We've seen some of these jurisdictional supplements with the Victorian government was the first one to put it out, then South Australia. New Zealand's just released their safe system audit guidelines, which I'll put there as well. They are sort of combining road safety audits and safe system assessments, which is interesting. But predominantly what I'm going to be taking you through and the way that I'll teach you to do a safe system assessment is in accordance with Austroads and industry practice within Australia. So that covers off Victoria, South Australia, New South Wales practice. They don't have particular specific documented anything different, and Queensland practice as well, again, don't have anything documented different, but they follow the process that Victoria and South Australia have done. It also is Tasmania and the Territory also do them in the same way. Western Australia does a few of them, certainly in the same way, but it's not it's at this stage not as popular as the other jurisdictions. Okay, so what I want to do is jump right to the end. In order to start this, I want to jump right to the end, and then I will come back to the start and we'll work our way back to this point. But this is one of the outputs that you would expect to see within a safe system assessment report. And it's some kind of graph that tells us a story. So on the y-axis here, we've got safe system alignment score. Now you can kind of think of this as a risk score, and it's pretty much that. And these clusters here we're seeing are different crash types: run-off road crash, head-on crash, intersection type crash, other, and that's a collectol. I'll talk about that in detail. Pedestrian, crash where a pedestrian's injured, cyclist is injured, or motorcyclist is injured. And so each of those is something that we're going to be thinking about. What is the risk of run-off road crash? What is the risk of head-on crash? What is the risk of intersection crash at this location? And you do that for the existing conditions, what's currently there. So that's the red. And then you do it for all of these proposals that they might be putting to you, designs. So this one's quite easy to see from these lovely cartoony figures. So we've got a roundabout. So this intersection, they're proposing a roundabout. Maybe they've got a design for a roundabout. They've got a design for a modified T intersection. They've got a design for a standard T intersection with traffic signal. So we can see there then immediately sort of the risk profile that presents after they've built this, or our prediction on what the risk profile will be when they build that new facility. We know what it is now in the red, and we know or we're predicting what it'll be. So this can then help you very much as if you receive one of these and you're the designer or the project manager, because you can sort of immediately see where you've got things, maybe of concern. I mean, cyclists either not going to help out at all, or we're going to go the wrong way. We're going to make things worse for cyclists under these conditions. It tells a story. So let's build this. Let's work out how can we get to these scores? How can we build this actual thing? Okay, the first thing you do, and this is in the Austroads Safe System Assessment Framework, it says, gather understanding of the context of the proposal, the project, the area. And Ostrodes put in these prompt questions into the guide and said, you could ask the designer, the project team, whoever it is, you could ask them all these sorts of questions. What's the reason for the project? What's the function of the road? Have you done a movement in place categorization? What's the speed environment? What are you, what commitments have been made in that space? Are there any particular road users that we should be aware of? Is there a school in the area? Is there planned to be a school in the area? What's the vehicle composition? Do you know vehicle volumes? Do you know the types of vehicles? What's the land use change? Are we expecting any significant movement? Is it an over-dimensional route? Gathering lots of ideas and thoughts, and the practical way we tend to go about this is to send these questions over to the designer or the project manager or whoever's sort of commissioned this safe system assessment, and say, could you provide any information you can on these to help us gather context, and please include any planning studies or reports or data that you have that can assist. So you gather this information. Then you might have a workshop with them and sort of discuss, okay, what's happening in this area? Have you thought about this? How's drainage going to work? Whatever questions you have, got a really good understanding of the area and the proposal or proposals or different options. So that gives you that nice context. Then you go and you'll look at the site, and then you'll come back and you will develop up a safe system assessment matrix. Now, and this is, it could be just called a table, but it's a safe system assessment matrix is its term, and it's got 3 columns. The columns are exposure, likelihood, and severity. That's why we've been banging on about that, exposure, likelihood, and severity, because you're going to need to now start putting things into their correct row. And across the top there, we've got different crash types, as we were seeing before. We've got runoff road crash, head-on crash, and intersection crash. Now, these crashes are vehicle crashes, cars crashing into each other, cars crashing into trucks. Those are the crashes we're thinking about there. Vehicle runs off the road, hits a tree or a culvert or a power pole or rolls over. Head-on crash, vehicle leaves their lane, hits a vehicle coming the other way. Intersection crash, vehicle going through an intersection, a vehicle going through the intersection the other way, they collide, maybe it's right turn against type crash. They're the intersection crashes with vehicles. For pedestrians, this is any crash where the pedestrian is the one that's injured. So if a pedestrian is crossing the road at the intersection, and we're imagining this is going to be a crash where a pedestrian's crossing the road here and struck, even though it happened at the intersection, we factor and account for that in the pedestrian crash category. Yes, okay, physical location may have been within the intersection, but pedestrian crash. Same with cyclists. Okay, maybe a cyclist in your mind, and you're predicting, saying, okay, they build this like this, cyclists are going to be coming down this hill really fast, and then they turn, and there's gravel and all these things. The cyclists are going to run off the road. That's a cyclist crash, not run off road. Motorcyclists, same thing. Doesn't matter where it's occurring, at the intersection or running off the road or the like, we factor it into and account for it in motorcycle crash. The other crash category is to account for anything that is not adequately captured in these other crash types. And what's commonly in the other category are sideswipe crashes between vehicles, railway level crossing crashes, rear end crashes if they're generated from non-intersection things like access points, mid-block crossings, and the like. If you're thinking about the back of queue issues at an intersection, there'll be crashes, maybe, queuing cars from here and then vehicles coming up don't have sight lines to the back of queue and we'll have crashes. We sort of account for that in intersection crashes because it's generated from the intersection. Other could include things like e-scooters if you had particularly high sort of numbers of those and wanted to assess them in their own unique category, but you have a bit of freedom within that category. Crashes with animals is another one that sits in that other crash category. So think of them as DCA codes or RUM codes type crashes rather than sort of the location of the crash, if that makes sense. Some of you who have done crash analysis and black spot treatments in the past that'll help you in your thinking. Those who aren't so experienced with that might not help you too much, but just think about what I've just explained there. So pop your questions into the chat as I'm going. I will check in with Marissa in a bit just to see if anybody needs clarification on any of that. But I'll walk you through populating this matrix or filling out the cells of this matrix and how we might go about actually putting some scoring to these. I'll then show you some real world safe system assessments so you can see what kind of outputs you'd be expected to get. Okay. Exposure. Let's start. Exposure to runoff road crashes. How many people are exposed to running off the road and crashing? And it's based on the AADT, annual average daily traffic. So we're just saying, what is the traffic volume on this road? That is going to dictate our exposure. So maybe you've got a traffic volume of 3,000 in AADT, expecting 3,000 vehicles a day through this road. We want to put a number there. We've put a number, it's 3,000, except for we want our number to be between 0 and 4. 3,000, not between 0 and 4. So we're going to need some sort of scoring reference sheet, some sort of categorization. And that is produced by Austroads. And I've taken this out of the Austroads Safe System Assessment Framework documents. You can find this repeated there. And you can see I've got a score, and I've got exposure, likelihood, severity, and I've got some information in there. You can see it goes 2, a 3, and a 4. So let's look at a 4 and look at exposure. Volumes of vehicles that might be involved in a particular crash type are very high, but the road is very long. Therefore, exposure is very high. For runoff road, head-on, and other crash types, AADT is greater than 10,000 vehicles a day. For cyclists, pedestrians, and motorcycle crash types, the volumes are greater than 100 units per day. Okay, so we've got an AADT there. It's 10,000. Greater than 10,000 is going to give us a score of 4. So that could be, 10,001 or 100,001. Going to get a 4 either way. For a 3, what do we got? The volumes of vehicles might be involved in a particular crash type is high for runoff road, head-on, and other crash types. 5,000 to 10,000 for vehicles. Between 50 and 100 for vulnerable road users. A 2. 2 is between 1,000, 5,000, or between 10 and 50. 1 is less than 1,000 or less than 10. And a 0 is, there is no exposure to that crash type. So it might mean that when there's actually no intersection in this bit of road we're looking at, then your exposure to intersection crashes is 0. Or maybe you're doing a motorway and you're comfortable to say there are no cyclists using this motorway. It's been, they're banned and they're not using it. And we're going to go at 0 for cyclist exposure. Or there's no pedestrians using this area. Now, yeah, you make a little bit of judgment sometimes on this. Like I wouldn't give 0 for pedestrians on a motorway because of, well, having done enough crash analysis on motorways to know that there's actually quite a surprisingly high amount of trauma of pedestrians on motorways, with people getting out of vehicles and walking around and doing all sorts of things. But that would be a 0. So we go back and we say, okay, we said 3,000 was our traffic volume. Where does that sit? Well, it's above 0 and it's above 1. Looks like it sits within that too, between 1,000 and 5,000 vehicles a day. So let's go back and we'll put a 2 there as our exposure score. Now, we're going to then put a 2 for head-on unless somehow we've fully separated those streams of opposing traffic with what you would have to say would be a high containment barrier system, like a concrete barrier system, or a test level 4 or 5 barrier. Like just the presence of, say, a grassed median with it is not enough to say you've eliminated exposure to crashes. Okay, you might have reduced the likelihood of that happening, but people can easily still get across that. Vehicles mount onto a barrier curb, no worries, and go across a grass median. So most of the time you'll sort of say, same as runoff road, and that's the same score. I'll do intersection, then I'll pause for questions, Marissa. At intersections, you'll see there that we're taking the traffic volume for each approach. So we actually add that up. So if we've got our road and it's got 3,000 vehicles per day, and maybe it crosses another road with 3,000 vehicles a day, we're taking 6,000 vehicles a day. And that's our volume then when we hit the intersection. And so we go, where's that sit? Okay, we've jumped up now from a 2 to a 3 because it's between the 5,000 and 10,000 vehicles a day. So we put a 3 there for our exposure to runoff road crashes. Okay, so we're starting to populate these cells with data, and we've got some scores already in there. Marissa, any questions at this stage?
Yeah, Ken, we have a few. Okay, what's a conservative assumption when there's no pedestrian, cyclists, or motorcyclist data? Can it be a percentage of the AADT?
Well, that's a really good question. And okay, so for motorcyclists, yes, it can be percentage of AADT, and you can use about somewhere between 1% and 2% of AADT is a good one for your motorcycle data if it's not a popular motorcycle route or some known particular motorcycle route. For pedestrians and cyclists, you can't do that. You can, hopefully your client will have some data for you, but often they don't. And you just need to make a judgment call on that. You can ask people who know the area, what do we think? And in the end, yeah, you just make a judgment call on it. But it's often sometimes at that point, are less concerned with the absolute specific number, like less than 10 or the like, and a bit more concentrating on this particularly low or, moderate or high or, very high. That's, you're just gauging, okay, it's a very low volume pedestrian route. That's what we know. And so that can help you. Good, thank you.
All right, thanks. Is a pedestrian on a footpath next to a road classed as a pedestrian movement, or is it just pedestrians on crossing a road?
No, it's pedestrians with a reason, like in crash risk. So what I would say is if you've got pedestrians, say for example, all using the footpath on one side of the road, okay, and there's nothing on the other side of the road, so there's no real reason for them to be crossing, okay, that you would still say you've got that exposure of all the pedestrians walking along there. It's just then when you get to what is the likelihood of crash, it's going to be very low because they're not on the road. The crash you're worried about is likely vehicles leaving the road and striking the pedestrians. But, the chance of that is probably much lower. But it will then orientate you towards saying, okay, pedestrian risk is low, but maybe we've still got to think about, vehicles leaving the road. Good question.
Okay, and someone else wanting some clarification. So if we had 500 vehicles and 200 motorcyclists or cyclists, we have 1 for cars, but 4 for VUs. So the score is 4 based on worst case?
So the score in exposure then, in that case, in the columns would be I forget the numbers they said. A 1 for all the vehicle ones, but a 4 for the vulnerable road user ones. That makes sense. So you're thinking about these crash types. Yes. So you got low. Okay. Let's take a road that's got it's basically like some laneway in the city that's a shared zone. Really very, very low vehicle volume. Like hardly anybody uses it in vehicles, but there's lots and lots of pedestrians that go through that area. Okay, you're still going to score everything on here for exposure. When you get to pedestrians, the score will be very high for exposure. It'll be a 4 for exposure. The score for vehicles in the runoff road, head-on and intersection will be very low. It'll be a 1 for runoff road, head-on and intersection. Hope that clarifies that.
Thanks, Ken. That's all the questions for now.
But keep them coming. This is exactly the point of this session, is to get these things clear in your mind, because end of today you'll be out there and then you'll be marked on it. So we're just talking there about pedestrians. So maybe this area that we're looking at has very low pedestrian numbers. We're out. It's got sort of farmland around it, and there's the occasional person out there walking their dog along the roadside, and the occasional person who for one reason or another is out there, but you're going to say it's very low, so we're going to go a 1, very low. Cyclists the same. Okay, maybe we say it's very low number of cyclists are here. There's the occasional tourist chugging along through the area, and maybe every Sunday morning there's a pack of training cyclists that sometimes use this route amongst their other routes. But overall, if we're thinking about this on a daily manner, we've got this 1, very low cyclist numbers. Motorcyclists, maybe we're saying 1% of AADT, so we're down at 30 motorcyclists a day. and 30, if we look back through here, what are we at? 30 is a 2. Then we go to other, and if we're thinking about sideswipe crashes or the like, we're going to take our traffic volumes, just as we've done. Think about another road user in particular, might do something else, but we're going to go with sideswipe crashes, and we're going to go with 2 there. So you can see there we've populated that, and because we've got hopefully data to, to work on, or we're using judgment based on, our knowledge of the area, asking questions of others who know the area, getting a bit of a feel. Are we high pedestrians, low pedestrians, very high pedestrians? And we put our numbers in. We write a little bit of justification in the cell as to how we got to this score. And then we've got our exposure scores nicely. Then we go to likelihood. And we say, okay, putting aside how many people are exposed to these crashes, what's the chance of a crash based on the physical infrastructure at this location? And you very well practiced at this now because you did your first assignment doing this, and you've been practicing it throughout. But there's lots of things that influence the likelihood of crashes: the speed, the geometry, the presence of sealed shoulders or not, the delineation, the warning signs, the lighting, the surface, the distractions in the area. These are all things that are influencing the chance of crash. And you critically analyze the existing road and any designs and say, what are the things that are going to influence the chance of a crash happening at this location? And you start dot pointing these out, right? You say, oh, the speed is medium, the geometry is good. There are no shoulders though, and there's a bit of edge drop off. The line marking is really good, and there's good guidance and delineation around the curves, but the super elevation's bad, and the skid resistance looks a little shoddy, but we maybe have a look at the skid resistance report if we can get our hands on it, and dot, lots of factors, right? Which is helping you gather in your mind, how likely are we to have run-off road crashes at this location, not based on how many people are going through it, but just based on these physical attributes of the existing environment. And you look here and you go back to your scoring your sheet and you say, okay, well, what's a 4 for likelihood? The likelihood of individual road user error leading to a crash is high, given the infrastructure in place. Example, high approach speeds to a sharp curve, priority movement control, filtering right turn across several opposing lanes and high speed. So there's some inherent characteristics that are making it much more likely for crashes to happen based on the infrastructure. That's a 4. A 3, it is likely that a given crash type will occur. That does not, you don't have a lot of help there. A 2 is unlikely that a given crash type will occur. 1, highly unlikely that a given crash type will occur. And a 0 is there's only minimal chance that a given crash will occur for an individual road user, given the infrastructure in place. Only extreme drive behavior and substantial vehicle failure could lead to a crash. Now, practically here, you almost never would give a 0 to likelihood, because within this, we are accounting for human normal failure. People falling asleep, people being distracted, people dropping their coffee in their lap, just being zoned out, thinking about the fight they've had with their partner, and all of these things happening. That's why it's very hard to ever give a 0 for the likelihood of crash. So you end up making a judgment call based on all of this, and you dot point lots of things out. As I say, you're justifying, okay, we've thought about this and this and this and this and this and this and this, And really this road compared to the other roads in the country has characteristics that make it more likely for crashes to happen or not. And you make your judgment call, and then you put your score in. Then you do the same for head-on, and you say, okay, now taking the volume of vehicles out, what is the chance of head-on? What's the geometry? How much separation have we got here? Is there a normal center line, or we've got a wide center line, or we've got a big grassed median? Have we got good lighting? We've got good delineation, and you look through all of that, and you may make your choice on score there. Then the intersection, you might say, okay, what is the control? Is this a giveaway control, or is this a signals, or is this a roundabout or a seagull intersection? What's the speed vehicles are going through? Do we have good sight distances? How many conflict points have we got? What's the surface, and how well can people see the intersection coming up? And is it confusing? And factoring all of this in, and you get to your score. And you do the same for each. Other could be sideswipe, whatever it is, or other crash types. And then, pedestrians. It's going to be not like we've already accounted for the fact that there's not many pedestrians in this location. So you can't use that as a likelihood factor. You're simply saying, okay, now a pedestrian is trying to cross the road or is walking along the road or whatever they're doing. What is the chance? What is the likelihood of crash, and what factors are influencing this? You say, oh, well, there's no crossing facility here. The speeds are high. There's no, not great sight distance where the pedestrians would be crossing, et cetera, et cetera. So maybe you go up high for that. Same with cyclists. And, often if you've got a low score here for these road users, it's going to be high here, because generally, why would a road authority have invested in pedestrian facilities at a very low volume pedestrian area? But you'll see how this plays out as we score it up. And motorcyclists tend to usually come out the highest. The reason for that is, sometimes cyclists, pedestrians are higher than motorcyclists, I should say, but because we're thinking here about motorcyclists running off the road, having head-on crashes, having intersection crashes, which are all, in here. And motorcyclists are smaller and less stable, and all of those factors. So each of these, you don't just put the score in like I'm doing here. You're dot pointing lots of ideas, lots of thoughts, lots of assessment things that you've noticed. Dot, 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 dot. And then you get to your score. Okay, I'll pause there, Marissa, and I'll again see if we've got any questions.
We do. We have a few questions. Okay, do tube counters or software count motorcyclists as Class 2 vehicles in a 12-bin count?
Yes, you can. Yes, you can get motorcycle counts through some of your tube counts. Sometimes they don't give you that though as well.
Okay. Can likelihood be substantiated by past crash data?
I caution you on that. Because past crash data is the product of exposure, likelihood, and severity. Okay, so to take crash data and attribute it to specifically likelihood isn't really the way to go. What you more likely do is use your crash data to sort of validate the product of all of these and say, and I even caution you a little bit on doing that. I mean, you do a safe system assessment, it's going to spit out where risk is. Depending on what the volumes of traffic are and how long things have been there, and a degree of just statistical randomness, you may play out that your crash history lines up with your safe system assessment matrix scores in the total products. But as in terms of likelihood, you can't really do that.
Okay. Is a driveway classed as an intersection?
No, it's an access point and you put it into other, but at some point you're going to say, well, there's enough volume out of that to call it an intersection. So you've got a big service center or something, you might be getting up to the point of saying this is an intersection. I think Ross has clarified the tube count 12-bin data thing in there. Thank you, Ross.
Thanks, Ross. Some other questions in the chat. With pedestrian and cyclist volume data, can you base it on a peak hour count extrapolated to 24 hours?
Yeah. Yes, but don't get fixated on this. So people are often getting very fixated on specific data. I want you to more think about where I said there, exposure is particularly low, is moderate, is high, is very high, and use these as a bit of a gauge. Okay, and because there's a fairly big range in there, it shouldn't really matter a whole lot on that. But yeah, I hope that helps.
Can crash history be considered for likelihood score?
Oh, we did that one already.
We did do that one. Okay. All right. And one other one. If you have others, should you add columns and rate them, i.e. essentially changing the overall score total from the usual? Follow-up question, can the total be changed that way or does it have to stay consistent?
Yeah. Okay. In theory, and in the Austrade's document, you could add more columns for specific users. In practice, that tends to be discouraged by road authorities to have some sort of consistency. And so if you had multiple other crash types, you're just putting them into the one. The reason it's sort of discouraged, is consistency and the like. But in theory, you can do it. If somebody's really interested in that, I have done some safe system assessments with breaking up the other into multiple. It's discouraged though. So this, I'm going to say this probably many times in this session and the next session. This is just a risk assessment methodology. Okay, so the same way you do your H&S risk assessment and others, you're thinking about that. This one just happens to have some numbers there which are going to get multiplied. Okay. Anything else come up there that we need to deal with?
No, I think that's about it for now. Thanks, Ken.
Well, I'll move through severity now, and then that's probably going to be a good time to pause and caffeinate or hydrate or whatever people want to do. So severity we go through when we look at, okay, what factors are there in the existing road environment that influence the severity of a crash when it happens? So now we're in the mindset of crash is happening. Somebody's having a runoff road crash. How bad is it going to be? Well, that's going to be influenced by the speed they're traveling. What's in the roadside? Like, are they going to hit a barrier system? Or are they going to hit a culvert? Or are they going to hit a tree? Or are they going to roll over? Or are they going to go into a big open sort of sand trap? What is it that they're going to hit? And there could be anything else there as well. And you see, etc. was used here, and it's sort of here, because these are just some things to start you thinking. You've got to think about anything else yourself. So you have a look at that environment, you have a think about, okay, a crash is happening, what speed are they going? Okay, they're going to leave the road, they're going to hit these things. And we go into our scoring reference sheet and we say, okay, well, what do we got here? What would a 4 be? Should a crash occur, it is highly likely that it'll result in a fatality or serious injury to any road user involved. Kinetic energies are high enough to cause fatal serious injury crashes, and it is unlikely that the forces will be dissipated before reaching the road user. So what does that mean? It means like, take for example, a barrier system. If kinetic energy is high enough to cause harm, when they hit the barrier system, the energy is dissipated over time before it actually reaches the driver or the passenger. Likewise, if there's a crash cushion, we're trying to absorb energy, dissipate energy over time. So you can have high speeds, but if there are these energy dissipating features. It's also, we're thinking about that delta V, the change in velocity. If there's an intersection and two vehicles are up at speed and crash in those angles where they're up at speed, then we can be at lower severity for those crashes. So if we look down at a 3, should a crash occur, it is likely that it'll result in a fatality or serious injury. A 2 is unlikely that it'll result in fatality or serious injury. A 1, highly unlikely. And a 0, should a crash occur, there is only minimal chance that it'll result in a fatality or serious injury to the relevant road user involved. This might mean kinetic energies transferred during the crash are low enough not to cause a fatal or serious injury, or that the excessive energies are effectively redirected or dissipated before being transferred to the road user. And then it talks about here, users may refer to safe system critical impact speeds for different crash types while considering impact angle, roadside hazard, barriers, etc. And where they say users there, they mean users of the safe system assessment framework. But as we showed you, we've tried to help out a little bit with this, and this has sort of been reproduced in Austroad's documents, but it's just a general indication guide. It's not precise, but it helps out a bit. And we know then that, okay, if we've got a cyclist being struck at 80 kilometers per hour, it's going to be a 4. If we've got a head-on crash between passenger vehicles at that sort of 40 kilometers per hour, we know we're down sort of in the maybe a 1 sort of territory. So you can use it as a bit of a gauge and help you with some of that scoring. And then you do, as we've been doing there, dot point, dot point, dot point, and you come out with your score. Maybe, the 3. So you're saying, okay, this is likely to result in death or serious injury when they run off the road and they hit whatever it is we were looking at as being hit. Maybe the head-on, we've said, well, it's also going to be a 3. Intersection, well, maybe we've said, actually, we think this one, because of the angles and the speeds and the like, we think this is going to be less severe. Other, maybe we think that's not going to be severe at all because it's a sideswipe crash we're interested in, and that's dissipating lots of energy into the environment. Pedestrians might say, well, okay, we know there's not many pedestrians there, but gee, the chance of a pedestrian crash is high for the individual, and the severity of that happening is going to be high because they're a vulnerable road user. And that would likely be the same for those two. Maybe motorcyclists might be a bit down. But you're dot pointing all this out, dot, 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 and then you fill up and you've filled it with scores. That's pretty exciting. Now, I'm going to do one more thing, then I'm going to take questions, then we're going to have our break. We multiply down. we multiply our scores down. So we do 2 times 2 times 3, and we get our total score there of 12. And we do that again. So we're multiplying all of these down to get scores for each of these particular crash types. And so on. Now, these are out of, 64? And you're starting to see, okay, we're building a profile of risk of these crashes at these locations. Okay, any questions as I sort of continue to do this? I've run out of space kind of here, haven't I?
We have, a few questions. How do side airbags influence the level of severity, say in hitting a tree side on?
Not too much. I mean, a little bit, but yeah, really, if you're above sort of 50 kilometers an hour, even your side curtain airbags is not going to be highly beneficial, most likely. So that graph with the colors is sort of taking that into account in a general way. Really, side impact into trees, 50, 60, 70 are all up close to the 4, in the 4 ranges. You need to side impact trees pretty slowly to survive. Any other ones?
And if we multiply down, if we ever have a 0 score in any of the categories, does that mean our resulting total score would be 0?
Yes, prize for that person, I think, because that was exactly the next thing I was just going to talk about. They've let it in beautifully, because that's one of the big reasons why the Austroads team was very keen on numbers here. Because if you can say, okay, let's take intersections. We're looking at this and there are no intersections. This is a mid-block. The intersection score is 0. Then multiply anything by 0, it comes out at a 0. And that makes sense because we don't care what the chance of an intersection crash is or how bad it's going to be. There are no intersections. There's no exposure to that. Or, it's been grade separated. There's no exposure to this crash. It doesn't matter. Likewise, if you could hand on heart say that absolutely nobody is going to crash at this location and you put a 0 there, you don't actually care how many are exposed to crashes and how bad they're going to be, because there will be no crashes. So 0 is your risk. And also here you can put a 0, and this is a bit of a disclaimer, but there's a disclaimer in this one. If you can say, okay, when all of these people crash because, there's lots of exposure and there's a high chance of a crash, but it's all going to happen at very low speeds, we don't actually care how many people are exposed and what the chance is, because everybody's going to walk away or just have minor injury. And that's sort of our overarching safe system objectives. Now, admittedly, if you've got a 4 and a 4 and then a 0, you probably want to look at that because you're going to have lots of minor bingles and bits and pieces, and it's not going to operate well. But at a pure safe system, purist perspective, that's okay. So that's right. And so the last thing I was doing there is saying you can then add these up across the bottom. So multiply down, add across the bottom, and get a final score out of 448 for your alignment with safe system principles. Okay. Any questions before I let people have a break?
For a grade separated intersection, would we still need to consider the on and off ramps?
Good question. So, yeah, you do, and you need to consider the 2 new intersections you've potentially created at the in there. So yeah, you're right. Your intersection score may not be 0. It may be still exactly the same because of those particular points, and your likelihood may be down. If it was grade separated and there were no, there were no access points, no on ramps, no off ramps, it went over and it went, and that everybody had to go to another access point onto it, then you're at 0.
And how liable are you if you say 0 and then it happens, or in any other case, how liable is the assessor given how subjective this is?
I don't think like the legal liability aspects of this is it's a risk assessment. You've done your due diligence in terms of assessing things and going through a process and ensuring that you're trained up to do this. That question would be like saying, what if I ranked something low risk in a risk assessment and then that happened? Well, yeah, it's low risk, and so yeah. I suppose the point on that is that 0 is not used that often in safe system assessments. It's quite rare, but you occasionally do it. But it is, again, don't get fixated on these numbers. That's just saying it's low risk.
Okay. No other questions at the moment, Ken. Should we have a stretch and a break?
I think we should. What do we give them? 4 minutes?
4 minutes. See you then. Okay.
Okay. So, I made a nice mess of this slide. But let's look at, I suppose, an example of this playing out, and it might help you if you're still a little bit unclear on any of this. So, okay, here we go. We've got an intersection. It's on, there's a windy road coming through here, and there's an intersecting side road. It's got a give way control. You can see there's a light pole there. There's a power pole. It's got a light on it as well. So there's a concept designed to build a roundabout at that location. Another concept design to build a signalized intersection. And there's another concept designed to build a signalized intersection, but make it a more conventional T intersection with slip lanes and the like. Okay. So what we do is we start with the existing road. So let me just jump back here. There you go. We start with that. Okay, there's no roundabout there. There's no signals there. It's just what's currently there before any upgrade. We look at it, we say, right, what is the exposure to crashes currently? What's the likelihood of crashes currently? What's the severity of crashes currently? And we score all of these. But you can see here, this is a bit of a mock example, but you can see that there are dot points on factors that increase the likelihood of crash and factors that decrease the likelihood of crash. So you're popping in lots of thoughts there. Increase, decrease. And you do the same for severity, increase, decrease, and you get your scores. Now, I want you to spend time on the existing conditions one. Make sure you get it right. Make sure you put all your factors in, because you'll be using this as a base for assessing the designs. So once you've finished all of that, you say, okay, happy, we've got our score for the existing conditions, we've put lots of detail in there. and you copy that. You copy the whole table, paste it, then you look at the design. You say, okay, now that area is going to be a roundabout. What has changed? And you start crossing out factors that are not there anymore because it's got a roundabout. And you cross those out, but you put in red factors that have appeared because there's a roundabout there. And they could be good or bad things. So you can see there, you cross that out, but add this. And then once you add, you make a different color, crossing a few out there, adding one there, crossing that out. And you get to the design scores for that option. And you go back and you grab your existing conditions again, you paste it, and you do the next option. Same thing, and you do it again. You go back and you get your existing conditions and you paste it, and you manipulate and modify it based on what that design is that they're planning to build. And you do that for as many options as you've got. Then you're able to produce these sort of comparative scoring. So you can say, well, the existing conditions was 118.5. I'll talk about decimal places in a second. And the roundabout will bring that down to 90, the modified T signalized intersection 99, the conventional T at 105. So what you can tell from that is that, okay, everything here makes things better. The roundabout is gives us our best alignment with safe system principles. However, it's not perfect. It's not a score of 0. So there's more that can be done there. But you can see then how we've got back to what I showed you sort of at the start here, that we can see there, okay, that's the existing condition scores for all these crash types. And these are the scores. So even though the roundabout came out as best alignment with safe system principles, we'd be wanting to think about that, wouldn't we? Like, oh, actually, but well, it's good for all of those crash types. Cyclist crashes, that's something we want to think about. Okay, I'll pause there, and I'll see if are there any questions at this stage, Marissa, or are we?
No questions at this stage, Ken.
Okay. So you've now got these scores and you've got this graph, and that's very helpful to people. Often they get to see which things are aligning better with safe system principles, not where are risks presenting. Then you make some recommendations to alter the design if you think you can get better alignment with safe system principles. And you make these recommendations for each design. So in that previous example, you would make recommendations to things to add to that roundabout or changes to the roundabout. You'd make suggestions for changes to the signals or alterations in both configurations. And you categorize those into primary and supporting. Now I'm going to put little handles on these because I want you to think of them as buckets of treatments. Okay, so primary doesn't necessarily mean my first in the way you think. I mean, these are treatments that are highly effective and will virtually eliminate the potential for fatal and serious injury occurring associated with a foreseeable crash time. It's not saying it's going to virtually eliminate that crash. It's just going to mean either that that it's within tolerable levels. But you could, in a safe system assessment, have 3 or 4 primary treatments in your recommendations. Or you could have just supporting. And supporting are ones that you expect to improve road safety, but are not going to virtually eliminate death and serious injury. Now, push to put primaries in always and make those recommendations and push project teams and designers to do more and do better and get these primary treatments in. But sometimes we're putting supporting treatments as well. Now, supporting treatments do have this little other dot point, which is around, you don't want it to stop the potential for a primary treatment being able to go in the future. So maybe, I don't know, like a high-ish speed road intersection, putting traffic signals is going to stop you getting that primary treatment in the future. It's going to make that a lot harder. It's not going to make things worse putting those signals in, but it's not getting us to that point of virtual elimination of death and serious injury. Non-safe system we put in there just as sort of almost terminology purposes. That's things that are going to make things bad, or they're going to, actively stop us getting really good treatments in the future. So you'll make recommendations and you will categorize them. And shortly I'll show you where, actually Marissa will probably be able to share her screen in a second and show you, because this is quite confusing for a lot of people. Is this primary? Is this supporting treatment? So in the Austrade Safe System Assessment Framework, and around sort of page 13, 14, 15, they just list a whole heap of treatments and pre-categorize them for you. So you're able to look at that and go, oh, okay, that's a primary safe system treatment for that crash type. So we'll show that to you in a second. Actually, maybe we'll do that now, Marissa, if you don't mind, and I'll bring something else up. If you've got that Austrade's document there, I don't know if you...
I do. Let me just share my screen with you. Hopefully that's up and running.
Yeah, it's there. So that's great. So you can see the table heading there is runoff road to the left or the right. And then you can see the green is your primary treatment, sort of medium barrier or barrier systems. And then you've got your yellow and your orange there. They're both supporting categories. There used to be. We used to talk about two supporting categories, supporting and step towards supporting, but it really got a bit too confusing for everybody. So people just have bulked it into primary and supporting. And then other considerations are sort of outside of what we really think about with the infrastructure characteristics, but are things that are good to be considered. So you've got those then for runoff road, head on. So there's another table for head on, then there's another table for pedestrian, cyclists and motorcycles. They're the same as the columns that we had. So that is, so there are those other tables. That is in the Austrade Safe System Assessment Framework. Yep, thank you, great. You can see that document. That is in the resource folder in the learning management system. It's also freely available from Austrade's website. You just got to create your login. So good, thank you.
All right, and I will just show you where that is on our LMS just quickly. It is in our resource folder, reference documents and resources, and you can find that link right there. That will take you straight to that PDF.
Excellent. Okay.
We have a question, Ken, if you'd like to answer that now.
Sure.
How does the reviewing process work by the client or designer? If they challenge our score, should we modify our scoring or stand our ground if we are confident we have scored it well? Noting that an SSA may have a significant influence in an options analysis. And asking this question because they have seen it happen and the client was very unhappy with the scoring and challenged it strongly.
Yeah. So it'll happen. And I suppose I'm very clear in road safety auditing that there's you can't really challenge road safety auditors on their findings. You can certainly add more information for their consideration and that, but really that risk assessment and that's a risk, or that take that finding out, that's a no-no with road safety auditing. The safe system assessment process is a bit more collaborative, and a bit more of that discussion can happen and scoring. You probably do at some point will find yourselves sticking to your guns and say, well, okay, we've considered all of that and we've thought about it all. We're still sitting at this score. And yeah, it's then over to them to deal with it. It's your end score that you put on there as the assessment team. The client, has to sort of deal with what's produced.
Thanks, Ken. That's all for now.
Let me just show everybody before I jump into another thing and then give us plenty of time to take people through. I just thought I'd show you a couple of actual real safe system assessments. Share that screen, I think. And it's not about going into the detail. I hope you can see that screen now. I assume you can. Tell me if you can't, Marissa.
We can see that.
Thank you.
Oh, good.
So you can see here, this one, it just looks like there's a T intersection and then it's going to get signalized. And so you can see there's a bit of the overarching results and some recommendations. That's all executive summary stuff. I want to jump down to find the matrix. So a bit of, description of the site and some of the options and surrounding area and some of those like those prompt questions and a bit of knowledge about surrounding land use. But here we go. So this is the existing conditions. This is what's there. And you can see there the exposure scores have been justified with some information. The likelihood scores, you can see here, what are the factors that increase the likelihood of crashes? So you can see there's a bit of thinking and a bit of detail. That's just the increasing. We go down a bit, and there's more, all of this is in there. These are factors that decrease the likelihood of crashes. So you can see there's a good bit of thinking and a good bit of noting, and they've really pondered it and looked at it and been out on site and thought about things and lots of different factors. Then they go to severity, and there's some things in there. It's a bit of thinking. Lots of things in there. And then they've got to their score. Then they've taken that matrix, nice and all filled out, and then said, okay, let's have a look at their design for this signalized intersection. What's changing? Well, it doesn't look like any of the traffic volumes or pedestrian or cyclist numbers are changing. There's nothing changed there. Oh, but the likelihood of crashes have changed. And you can see things have been crossed out. Things have been added. Things have been crossed out. Lots of changes have happened. Changes to some scores. And there you go. So you can see here they've used a few 0.5s. Now, 0.5 is sort of accepted, but a little bit discouraged. You want to try to stick to whole numbers. You can use a 0.5 if you absolutely feel like we can't, as a team, decide between these two. A 0.5 is okay. You don't go any more precise than that because it's a subjective sort of thing. If you go to like 4 decimal places, it's just ridiculous because it's not that precise at all. In fact, there are no tools out there that are that precise for when you're talking about road infrastructure and the like. But anyway, it's a broad brush risk assessment tool. Then you might present some of that stuff. I'll get to those questions in a bit, and there should be some treatments. Primary treatments and then supporting treatments. These are your ideas to improve things. So some photos from the site. There'll probably be a bit of land use information and a few things in the appendix just there. So that's an example there. What am I doing here? I wanted to look at another one quickly, so I'll stop sharing that. I'll see if I can find another one. Yep. Oh no, it's one I just looked at, wasn't it? Oh no, that was that one. Yeah, this one I think we just was another reason. Somebody I think asked, yeah, about like what if you've got a long route and it's kind of varied, and I think this is a good example there of how to think about something with very, distinct characteristic changes in an environment. You break it up into sections, and then you do that assessment per section. So you can end up with quite a few matrices and graphs and things like that. But sometimes if you do it all as one, it can hide things. Sorry, I'm not sharing my screen there, am I? Okay, hopefully you can see that now. So that's sort of, you can see sections cut up and then specific matrices and graphs produced for each section and an option. Okay. So let's get back to our slides then.
We have a question, Ken. Interested to know why that's just disappeared. Interested to know why the AADT exposure didn't change, noting that there's always traffic growth and upgrades are likely to attract more traffic. Should we consult with traffic modelling outputs to verify this?
Yes, you should. Very good. But I'll tell you why, probably, because if I go back to our scoring reference sheet, which I'm going to go back. Let's go to here. For intersection crash types, AADT is greater than 10,000 vehicles a day. Okay, so your traffic growth goes from 20,000 to 50,000. Still stays at 4. There's no change in the scoring assessment. Okay, it sort of just says it's high traffic volume. That's it. Or you're in at 1,000 and it grows to, goes to 1,500. Still a 2. You can do assessments utilizing traffic modeling and taking future scenarios, but yeah, it's often doesn't change results because of the broad brush nature of the assessment methodology. Any other questions?
No, not at the moment, Ken.
Okay. So then you go into these prompt questions, which are wider than the infrastructure specifically, and they really think about general road safety things, the road users. And you ask these questions, you don't put numbers to this, you just put dot points, thoughts, a little bit of writing in there. Are road users likely to be alert and compliant? And are there factors that might influence this? What are the expected compliance and enforcement levels, drugs, alcohol, speed, road rules? What's the likelihood of driver fatigue? Can enforcement activities be conducted safe? These generate some interesting thoughts sometimes when you're looking at a design. You've got, full containment barrier systems, which, are giving really good scores in terms of reduction in the severity of incidents and the like. And we get these wonderful safe system assessment scores out of it. And then we maybe say, oh, well, but can we do enforcement anymore? And you might talk to Highway Patrol and they say, well, no, we've got nowhere to pull over now. We can't pull vehicles over because these barrier systems. And we maybe then say, well, can we play with this design to create areas where this could happen and factor that in? Are there special road users? So is it entertainment precincts, elderly, or children, on-road activities? Are there distraction by environmental factors, big pineapples or something? What's the level of alignment with the ideals of safer vehicles? This is a very generic question, which is actually put in there because of the scalability of the safe system assessment. You can, in theory, do a safe system assessment on like an entire remote community or a mine site and operation, and you'd be looking at their vehicle fleet and getting that understanding. Are there factors that might attract a large number of unsafe vehicles? Heavy vehicle flow too high? Is it recreational motorcycle area? Can we detect unroadworthy or overloaded vehicles? Can enforcement of those sorts of things be undertaken safely? Has vehicle breakdown been catered for? So that's often comes in some of these motorway style assessments where they're using a shoulder for a running lane and different things. Then you go into post-crash care. Are there issues that might influence safe and efficient post-crash care in the event of a severe injury? Congestion, stopping access. Again, that's usually a bit motorway, and can vehicles get across medians and things as needed? Do emergency and medical services operate as efficiently as possible? There's been some interesting safe system assessments of areas that are very hard to access up in mountains and very slow and inefficient to get medical attention to injured parties. And so then some different thinking around, building helicopter landing pads and those sort of things. Are emergency response teams protected during a crash event? Is there correct information via radio VMS? And the last one here around cooperative ITS and those sort of things, again, is a bit of a general question. I've only really seen it play out usefully in sort of like some tunnel, big new freeway tunnel style things about how that communication with vehicles sort of plays out, but it's in there for us to use and to think about. Okay, so
sorry, Ken, the prompts are in the Off-Road guides?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, they're straight out of the Off-Roads guide. You could ask other things if you think of them. That's not an issue.
Thanks.
So then you report this up, and most jurisdictions, or some jurisdictions, have released template reports. So that's what you can use. We're going to provide you one shortly, and you're welcome to, it's a Victorian government one, but you're welcome to debrand and put your own branding on it. That's fine. We just have this sort of consistent set of headings and consistent way of reporting these across Australia and New Zealand. And they're sort of the things that are in there, as you can see, dot pointed. But as I say, because you've got a template, you just follow that. And the template we're going to give you, we've highlighted some specific things within that template in yellow. And those are the things for the purpose of this assessment activity we want you to be filling out. We've tried to make it very clear. You only need to do things that are highlighted. There's some other stuff in there that if you're doing a real one, you'd have to fill out and the like. And there's some standard text you'd leave in there. But just for our purposes, you're only going to fill out the highlighted things. And Marissa will take you shortly and show you where you're going to download this template, and then we'll talk through what you've got to fill out. But I want to say, we're going to ask you to go to a site, and the site will be near the address that you gave us, either your home address or your office address or whatever you said. And we're going to ask you to go to that site. We're going to give you a design, but we're physically going to ask you to go there. Look at how it's operating now. Look at the vehicles, how they go use the intersection, pedestrians and cyclists. Then look at the design and imagine it built and think, oh, I wonder how that's going to work. Oh, I wonder how pedestrians are now going to get from there to there. Okay, vehicles, they might be going a bit slower now, or these sorts of things. So you're going to gather this high level understanding of the site. You do not need to do things like measure lane widths, put your head down to look into drainage pits to see if they're blocked or anything like that. Just stand back from the site and just gather a feel for it. we've risk assessed all the sites we're giving you, and we've made sure that they can be done very, very safely from an occupational health and safety perspective. There's areas you can stand back, you can be away from traffic, you can watch. There's areas you can park safely away from the site and not put anybody else in danger, not block sight lines, and the like. So we want you, we require you to wear a high-vis vest when you go out there, zipped up. We need you to stay off the road, as in don't be standing out there in live traffic. You might cross the road, but don't be hanging out on the road. Don't be a hazard yourself. Don't make people walk around you in live traffic. Park safely. And we're going to ask you to read a safe work method statement and agree to it. The safe work method statement just says, I think it says things like you're not going to be intoxicated when you go out there, and if you're having to drive more than a few hours, you'll take a break. Now, if you got to that and you said, oh yeah, I've got to drive a few hours to get to this site, just tell us. We'll give you a site closer to wherever you are. We don't want this to be a major impost on people in terms of looking at your site. So you've all got these individual sites across the country, and Marissa will show you shortly where you will find your site and where you'll see your design and how we get the template. And in fact, I think we'll do that right now.
Yeah, I'll load up the LMS.
Right.
Yeah, okay. We have a question while I'm doing that. At the start of this course, the criteria was stated for the requirement of SSA. I note that SSAs are not as common as road safety audits. How do we promote SSA for, say, developer-funded projects?
Yeah, I'll talk about that next session, actually. It's more, the last session really talks about the process of safe system assessing within organisations, register of assessors, when they should be done in projects. And yeah, I'll include in there developer funding, because I think that's a really interesting, point.
All right, so in the LMS, under Module 4, we have the safe work method statement that Ken mentioned. So you will need to just click into that one and select that you agree. And then under complete your safe system assessment is where you'll find the details for your assignment, or for this assignment. So in here we have the assignment template in Word format here, which I'll open up in a moment for you. We also have a graph generator. We have a whole list of PDFs here. These are the sites that we have allocated to you to conduct your audit at. You'll just have to have a look for your name there at the end of one of the files. Just find the one that we've allocated to you. As Ken mentioned, if by chance we have allocated a site to you that is 100 kilometres away from your home, please just let us know. Or if you prefer something closer, just let us know and we can fix that up, no problem. You'll note that there are probably a couple people that are assigned to the same site as you. If you do know those people, if they're some of your work colleagues, you are most welcome to complete the audit together as a group. But we importantly do note that you do need to submit your own report, write your own report and submit your own report there. So yeah, you can conduct the site inspection as a team, but please complete your own report there. I'll note the due date here is the Thursday, the 15th of June. So we have given you a couple weeks. Next week, we only have a session on Thursday. There is no Tuesday session. So if you do have any questions, shoot us through an email at any time, or you can raise your questions next week on the online session. I will open up the online template here. If Ken, you want to talk them through that one?
Yes, I do. So maybe hit the enable editing for me up the top. Not that you're going to edit anything. It just always annoys me when that thing's up there. Okay, so stamped very clearly over the first 2 pages. Complete only the highlighted sections. We've given you the whole template. Okay, so look, all these things crossed out. Just don't worry about it. We're not going to get you to spend time filling out tables of contents and lists of figures and those sort of things. But gee, we want your name in there. And that, as Marissa mentioned, go back up, sorry.
Yep.
If you do this with somebody else, because you look at that site and there's another name there, it was that we have both names in there, or we changed the rules on that, didn't we?
If you're conducting it as a team?
Yeah.
I think there is a section where you can pop in who you conducted the audit with. I'd have to, is that on this one or the RSA one?
It's in the RSA one.
That's the RSA one, okay.
Yeah. So if you do it as a team, you're okay to put other people's names in there, but we want you to fill out your own matrices is what we're
saying. That's right.
We don't want two of the exactly the same. So use your own words and the like. But most of you probably won't have somebody else to do this with at your site. Anyway, so a little bit of description of the proposed works there, the speed limit, and we want to know the speed limit at the site. So you're filling that out. Snip of the design that you were given, so that's in there nicely. The assessment summary at 3.1 there is, you're going to have to do that at the end after you've actually done all your scoring, and then you sort of put a little bit of a summary there and the scores. The graph, again, you're going to have to do that at the end, and we'll show you shortly that we've got a little just Excel graph generator for you. I mean, I'm sure you could all whip it up in 5 minutes yourself, but we've got one just to help you. Then you see here we've got the matrix, and the first one we've got here is going to be your existing conditions. So you're going to leave that little column that says design 1 blank for this one, but you fill out all that information, and there's going to be no scores for the design one. It's the existing conditions. Then you I don't know if you actually need to copy it. No, you do copy it, don't you? Copy it and you paste it. Oh, there's even an example there for you.
There is an example, yeah. Yep.
You're going to paste it, and you're going to then fill out the rest of it and manipulate it. Strike throughs, cross outs, and all those sort of things. So there's the example of the one that's upgraded, and so you can see they've filled out the design 1 scoring as well. So that way it's easier to sort of compare existing to design, what are the changes. So yep, keep going down. So you'll only have one design option. And then we want you to give us some suggestions for that design. What are things that could be changed? Treatments for consideration. And you dot point those in there. Primary treatments. So you add in there things that you think could be changed. Could be adding raised crossings, could be adding a roundabout, it could be anything. You don't fill out the project responses because that is always left there. So whoever received this report would be able to make those comments. Then you put supporting treatments in as well. And you might say, improve this sign or add warning signs here or change the line marking here or whatever it is. So you list a number of those. Don't worry about a conclusion, but we do want to see a photo of you at the site, because a requirement of a safe system assessment course is that you actually physically go to a site, you look at your design, you look at the site, you do all of that thinking. So we want a photo of you in your high-vis vest on the site. Prove to us that you actually went there.
You need a smile as good as Ken's there.
Okay, so we've also got this little graph generator tool. So you can just put in your exposure scores and your likelihood scores and your severity scores, and it will spit out a graph for you that then you can snip or copy and paste. Oh, you went very high on those scores,
Did I?
but yes.
Yeah. Just showing how it works.
Yes, thank you. So let's just go back here and maybe just click randomly on one of those PDF designs. And we'll just have a look at sort of an example here. Okay, so it's an intersection of some description. It doesn't appear it's currently, it doesn't appear to be currently signalized, and they're signalizing it. And you can see there's some traffic volumes. Okay, they've provided you use the volumes there, even if you know those volumes are wrong, because you know the area, or for some reason you still use those. They're just there to ensure that we're checking that, do you understand how to use your scoring reference sheet for volumes? Motorcyclist volumes unknown, well, then you'll make a prediction. Remember that 1% of AADT is a pretty good gauge. So that's what it is. So if you're confused about what they're doing, you can email through and ask, but hopefully it's fairly obvious. That's not currently there, so you're imagining that built and you're assessing that, but you assess what's currently there first. Great, thank you. I think we might have had a question.
Can the site inspection be done at any particular time, Ken?
Yeah, that's up to you whenever you do it. We don't want you going out there at night, though, just from an occupational health and safety perspective, and there's no need to. Safe system assessments, it's up to you. In a real one, it's up to you whether you go out there at night. It's not like a road safety audit where it's an absolute requirement, but it might help you gather intel and information.
And Richard's just mentioned that he has had a crash at his assigned location.
Wow.
What are the chances?
Maybe, Richard, we're into your data and we knew that. We assigned it that way. No, we're not. We've got a quiz. Is that quiz?
We do have a quiz. We have a Module 4 quiz for this session. So double the work. We've got an assignment and a quiz. So have a go at that one. And Richard's saying it was 20 years ago, but the location hasn't changed much.
In the assignment, when's it due?
Yeah, the assignment is due in 2 weeks on the 15th of June. So we have given you a couple of weeks for that one. As mentioned before, if you have any issues at all doing that, shoot us through an email, or you can raise your questions next week on our online session next Thursday. We don't have one on Tuesday, so next Thursday. So a good couple of weeks to get that one done. Yeah.
So my recommendation is use the sort of 10 or 12 minutes we're going to give you now to just make sure you've got everything you need. You know where your site is. You've had a look at it. Download it all. Put it in there on a file and get ready to go. Try and get started on it this week, so you can come and ask those questions in the next session. If you're really confused about anything, reach out. But I think you'll enjoy it, and I think it's a good way of thinking through risk at a site and presenting that. We're hoping it doesn't take you an excessively long time. I mean, we tend to, in sort of continuing professional development hours, put about 2 hours to this exercise, assuming your site's fairly close to your home, maybe 2.5 hours. But really, if you're getting well beyond that, it's probably you're going over the top on this. Reach out if you want one-on-one assistance. We'll set up a Teams meeting or a Zoom meeting with one of our experienced safe system assessors to talk you through any challenges you're having. But otherwise, I think it's pretty good. Anything we've missed?
No, nothing we've missed. Any last minute questions, anyone? Type them in now, but otherwise we will see you next week.
Yep. So use this time to get yourself moving and finish any quizzes that are outstanding.
Yeah.
If you haven't got feedback on your first assignment, that's coming through very shortly. But I think most people did pretty well on that. Hang on, there's a question.
Yeah, double check on assignments. Some people have existing case assessment, some have design assessments, or both.
Okay. Yep. No, fair question. We are. Let's clarify this again. To do a safe system assessment, everybody is going to look at the existing conditions, and the design case. Okay. So you have two matrices, existing conditions, design. Everybody does the same.
Great. Thanks.
Awesome.
Great.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Reach out if you've got questions.
Yep,
Thanks.
absolutely. See ya. Have a good day.
Bye.